Neighborhood History Channel, where we bring you history in a friendly, neighborly manner 24/7, 365 or 366 days a year. This is History Hefner, back in the Friendly Neighborhood History Studio and back in my customary smoking jacket for the second part of our Q&A, Ask Me Anything. And this time my Wi-Fi is intact, so we should be able to go for a full hour. Yesterday I was out of town taking care of some business, and so I wasn't quite able to get the same tech that I usually was able to, and it took me a while to upload my Friday videos. We do long form videos every Monday and Friday that drop here on the channel, and we also have our Q&A, Ask Me Anything, and we had yesterday's, but it went for about 45 minutes or so till tech pulled us aside, and then we were going today for an hour until about 7 o'clock on the East Coast of the United States. So please like and subscribe if you enjoy history. Drop a topic that you are interested in, and as Kevin is saying, like the live and subscribe for more. We have my wonderful moderators, Rodolfo and Harry, to join us today, and I am dressed more formally than I think ever before with a shirt and tie combination from yet another graduation I went to this morning, coupled with my smoking jacket. It's graduation season, so I've been getting quite a few invites from former students and things like that. So I have been dressing fancy schmancy back-to-back days in my live stream with a tie, and this is the second part of our Q&A, Ask Me Anything. Tomorrow is my live stream lecture in which I will be talking to you guys about the decline of the British Empire in the 1940s and 50s in honor of our wonderful moderator, Harry, who is across the pond and does such a great job across the pond moderating the chat and informing us about British history, things I wasn't even aware of. And he already has a question, as you guys can do too, by putting it in the chat. Liking and subscribing, it makes you a friendly neighborhood historian. And as previously mentioned, we are not sponsored by Crystal Geyser, but I sure do love their water. I've got something very special to show you all later, but I hope you enjoy, along with the smoking jacket in the studio. We are on our turf in many ways. This is a home game for us. Speaking of home games, the Thunder don't know how to defend home court, which is why they're losing the NBA Finals right now. Harry, do you think Sparta is the coolest Greek city, not the best, but the coolest and most famous? It's tough to pick a best. I think the Spartans proved that they were the best on many occasions, and for me, they're the most fascinating. I think we're all attracted to power and strength. That's the appeal of Thrasymachus in the Republic, which was supposed to be an analogy for Sparta, and that was the appeal of the Spartans throughout their time. And while the Spartans did destroy the Athenian Empire and curtail their democracy, by the end of the 5th century BC, the Spartans have proven themselves the most successful military enterprise in the Greek Isles. So, yes, and if you enjoy what I'm talking about, that's what we do here. I'm answering all your questions related to history and social studies. This is the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel, where we bring you history in a friendly, neighborly manner. Welcome to our second part of our weekend Q&A, Ask Me Anything, Fridays and Saturdays at 6 Eastern, and then Sunday, our live stream lecture tomorrow will be about the fall of the British Empire. Hello, everyone. Miracle, hello. Danny, hello. Yeah, FH, he'll have to come here, and I'll shout him out when he's here himself. Shamir, hello. And I'm not saving the gap. I've actually got my Invisaligns finally, and so my gap is closing. Let me see here. Do you agree that Africans are way better than American blacks? I would not agree with that. I love all blacks and whites all over the world. But thank you for joining us from Kenya and from Zimbabwe. It's so great to see people from all over the world join us, like Harry, who was our moderator from the UK. Didn't the Spartans lose a war? Yes, the Spartans lost many wars, as did the Athenians to the Persians, but the Spartans did win the Peloponnesian War, which destroyed the Athenian hegemony over the Aegean Sea, known as the Delian League. So check that out. 26-year war, and after 26 years, the Spartans were victorious. The Greek Civil War, aka the Peloponnesian War. Hello, thank you for joining us. Remember to like and subscribe if you enjoy history, or you like the vibes, or the smoking jacket, or anything. And yes, this is a 19th century style smoking jacket. This is the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel. What's your view on King Alexander's War of King Himu on the bank of the Indus? Alexander did not know how to fight against elephants, but his soldiers were too war-weary. Alexander could have successfully defeated the Indians. He was great at adaptation and improvising on a military scale. So if he had just stayed around, if his soldiers hadn't been war-weary, he probably would have been able to defeat I think it was the Mauryan Empire, or the Gupta Empire. I do not work in Scientology, but I'm dressed nicer than most of them are. Orthodox Christianity, I talk about it a lot when referring to the Russian Orthodox Church. I'm a Russian historian, and I do videos all the time on Russian history, so you might want to check that out. What's your favorite war, if that's a thing? War is hard to pick a favorite, but what I find to be the most fascinating are the Napoleonic Wars. And yes, it's a red tie, red jacket. It works very well. Thank you for joining us from London. I don't know what that is. from Slovakia. So I've got a video on Slovakia and Slovenia, and I explained the difference between the two because Americans don't know their European countries, particularly their Balkan countries, quite well. Great Depression obviously starts in America, spreads to Europe because the European economy was becoming more and more dependent on the American economy. In fact, the Great Depression is so bad in Germany that it gives rise to radical parties like the communists and the Nazis on the other end of the spectrum, rising to political prominence, offering quick solutions for complex problems caused by Germany's economic collapse because of the Great Depression in America. It obviously leads to the rise of Keynesian economics as John Maynard Keynes becomes the favorite economist of everybody at that time, and Franklin Roosevelt institutes the New Deal to deal with it. There's a twofold nature of it. You have the economic side, and then you have the agrarian side with the Dust Bowl, destroying U.S. crops all over the plains, forcing people to move westward towards from Oklahoma to California. They were called the Okies, and it's the inspiration for Steinbeck's Grapes of Wrath. Favorite Baltic country and why? Interesting. I like Lithuania because I love its connection to the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, and to understand that Lithuania was once the predominant power in Eastern Europe and not Russia is quite fascinating. Thank you for the compliments on the shirt and tie combo. Priya, hello. From Germany, Ole, thank you for joining us. I really appreciate that. Let me see here. Yeah. What classifies you as a Russian historian? I have a master's in history and my thesis, which you can access by going to my Substack and joining us there. I also have a Patreon, Instagram, X, Facebook, all of that stuff. But on my Substack, I have my master's thesis, which you could go and read, where I discuss the history of the great game, Russia and Great Britain's competition for control of Afghanistan in the 19th century. My channel is based on history. Yeah, the Spartans had a oligarchy, democracy, and a monarchy. They kind of had a dual-fold government. I don't have a cigar, but I do have this incredibly nice glass given to me by one of my best friends, and it's inscribed with Friendly Neighborhood Historian, although I'm not technically the Friendly Neighborhood Historian. And I've got some hot tea, some oolong tea that I brew myself. I got a samovar for my recent birthday, and I like brewing tea, but it's got my name and my channel inscribed on it, but it has where my middle finger is, not trying to do anything provocative, but that is where you can place a cigar. So it's technically a whiskey glass where you can put cigar in it, and I've been holding that, and it's pretty hot, so I've been keeping it on my lap to cool down. Centrism. There's obviously this idea of centrism is popular to people who don't want to be provocative and be too cutting edge. It appeals to people who want to be reasonable and listen to all different sides. So Aditya, I think it sometimes being a centrist, being a moderate is appealing because it denotes the ability to critically think through an issue where you don't have to agree lock, stock, and barrel with what one side is saying. You can pick and choose where you stand on different things. It's also considered it's also lampooned and criticized as a sticky position where somebody is being able to cop out by saying they're a moderate rather than sticking to a side. So I'm talking about whatever you want to talk about. So if you have a historical topic or interesting idea that you would like to discuss, drop it in the chat and I'll be sure to answer it in a timely manner here at the Friendly Neighborhood History channel. We have, are you going to get 2,800 likes and subscribe to best? I hope so. We have Q&As, Ask Me Anythings, every Friday and Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern, where you can ask me anything you would like about history, social studies, and the like. And then tomorrow, join us for our live stream lecture, where I'll be lecturing on the decline of the British Empire. I did not see your question, and you might want to drop it in the chat again. I love Azerbaijan, fascinating place. I don't know when exactly it became a delineated country from Georgia, Armenia, and the rest of the Transcaucasus region. That was obviously under the Soviet sphere of influence and also under the sphere of the Ottoman Empire before then, and the Russians. Don't know too much beyond that. Artel, thank you for joining us from Ukraine. If you like learning about Ukraine, which obviously is important for many, many reasons nowadays, check out my recent series on Russian history, where I discuss the Kievan Rus in detail, and Ukraine's history is part of that story. Russia really does start in Ukraine. You can't have Russia without Ukraine, and in some ways you can't have Ukraine without Russia, if you like hearing me as a centrist. Have you traveled, visited for history? What's your favorite? I want to do more traveling and things like that. Obviously, I want to make it to Russia, but Europe is really kind of where most of my historical studies are at, so I would love to go to Europe at some time, but all over the world. As much history as I can swallow up, as much of a culture and different societies that I can swallow up, the more I'll enjoy it. What is the relationship between Bangladesh and Russia? Don't know much about their direct relationship. I know that the Soviets were really interested in influencing India to be a communist government, and socialism was popular in India, but not exactly communism during the first few decades of India's existence, independent of the British. So what if the Russians had convinced France and Britain to side with them against the Ottomans in return for guaranteeing them Black Sea access? Would have been fascinating. I don't think it could have ever worked because Britain and you're talking about the Crimean War, which is where smoking jackets come from. Turkish tobacco was given to the British, who helped the Ottoman Turks, and to keep their clothes, their undergarments clean, they started wearing these jackets that would absorb the ash and the smell of a smoke from their pipes. The truth of the matter is, the Ottoman Empire was very, very willing to let the British and the French help them, despite the fact that they had hated each other. The Russians were surprised that Christians were helping Muslims, but it was all about keeping Russia's political power and influence down because Russia was getting too powerful in the Balkans. And after the Napoleonic Wars, Europe had created a concert of powers where one kingdom or empire couldn't get too powerful on the continent itself. International empires were obviously growing at a massive rate, like the French, the British, and yes, even the Russians. But domestic power and influence over the European mainland was seen as a threat to that balance of power, so that's why Britain and France sided with the Ottomans in that war. And I don't think it was going to change. I am not from Germany, but I have a lot of respect and knowledge about German history. My favorite Stan country, good question. I don't want to pick a favorite. The one I know the most about, probably Afghanistan because of my studies. Hello, Edward. Simon the Bunny is here. Wonderful. We've got one of our longtime moderators, another great Brit from Great Britain, Simon the Bunny. Yes, British Empire tomorrow, decolonization. Looking forward to it for our live stream lecture. We have a live stream lecture every Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern. Our Q&A, Ask Me Anything, every Friday and Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern. And long-form videos Mondays and Fridays at 8 p.m. Eastern. Let me see here. Yes, I am male identifying. So trying to catch up with the chat. What's your favorite period in history? Where I would like to live, late 19th century France. It's just such an incredible time. The Impressionists, the music of the Can-Can, Offenbach, Bizet. I love that era before the Great War. There was a lot of peace and tranquility in most of Europe, and the empires were proud and prosperous, and there was a lot of new inventions and technology available, and there's nothing like a French cafe scene when Renoir is painting. And thank you for joining us from Denmark, Martin. I really appreciate that. I am an American. I don't specify where exactly in America because America is big and spread out. And I'm glad you love history. I do too. What was the demographic support for liberal repubs? What period of time were liberal repubs common, if any? The 20th century saw a lot of liberal Republicans, if you're referring to American politics. Nelson Rockefeller was a liberal Republican. Republican presidents like Eisenhower, Nixon, and Ford are somewhat more liberal than modern conservatives like Reagan, George W. Bush, or Donald Trump. So there's that. Atlantis probably didn't exist, but was a theoretical idea and a story about hubris that Plato used. And because of that, it kind of weaved its way into this Grecian culture, reflecting Grecian culture, religion, and history. And the Greeks always wanted it to exist beyond the Pillars of Hercules, which are the Straits of Gibraltar. There was the theory of another continent that sank that became the theory of Atlantis. Favorite Russian republic? Interesting. I don't know if Russia's ever really had a republic, to be quite honest with you. I really would have loved to see what the provisional government of Kerensky could have done had the Bolsheviks not seized power in October and November of 1917. My favorite Byzantine emperor, Justinian. I've got an entire video on him you should go check out. I think Justinian is just the man. Ruling over a time when the entire world is falling apart, Justinian made the Byzantine Empire powerful, prestigious, and strong. Yes, I do like steak. Medium well. German assistance in the election of Lenin. Yes, they let Lenin go through Germany to get back to Russia to destabilize them because they knew the communists were against the war and would take Russia out of the war. That was why. Let me see here. Hello, Andres. Good to see you again. Just catching up with the chat. I'm trying to answer in a timely, friendly, neighborly manner, so please give me some time. And if you're enjoying what you're hearing and what I'm talking about here about history and social studies, like and subscribe. And if you really want to help the channel, consider donating, joining, getting a super comment, something like that, becoming a member here or on Patreon where you can access my First Lady series. Anything helps the channel grow, but just you being here is more than enough. We're primarily Tsar and British royal family members related from the same family hierarchy. To some extent, they were all cousins. If you read the correspondence between Nicholas II and Kaiser Wilhelm right before they went to war in 1914, they called each other Willie and Nicky. And George V wanted to bring the Tsar and his family over to Great Britain after the revolution, but Lloyd George, worried about a communist revolution in the wake of the Red Scare in the UK, refused to allow it to happen. What demographic group most supported Prohibition? What political party? Women, and I think it was the Republicans, but there was an entire party a one issue party called the Prohibition Party that was just totally committed to temperance. But if you look at where temperance and the Prohibition movement in the 19th century in America came from, it was mainly out of a Second Great Awakening, which also the strange bedfellows were abolitionists and women suffragists. I've read it, I've studied it, there's a bunch of ways I know. Thank you so much, Wild Food. I really appreciate that. Do you know that the true history of natives, not what schools teach, like what actually happened to them? Which natives? Where? When I talk about Native Americans in the America, like I did a little bit yesterday, people are very quick to assume and to broad sweep them into one group. But the Native Americans, as you can see from my background, this incredible map that I really need to study intricately and talk to you about more here on the channel in my short videos, which drop every day. The Native Americans were a diverse group of people. There were many different nations and cultures within them, and it's hard to say, when I hear someone say the American Indians and just broad brushstroke them, whether they are attacking them or praising them and attacking the Europeans, there's not enough attention paid to who they actually were and what they actually did and how they actually lived and interacted with each other. That it means admitting that they were just as diverse, or even more so, as the Africans or the Europeans, and prone to all the same attributes and traits of the Europeans: trade, technological development, although the Native Americans were different. Were different because they were far more itinerant than the Europeans were. And that led to less urbanization and less commitment to technological development or social development. That's why they didn't have the feudal system with the Native Americans. But that's Native Americans in the plains and in the southeast of the United States. Native Americans obviously developed intricate societies like the Olmecs, Toltecs, Mayans, and Aztecs in Central America and Mexico. So the Native Americans are an expansive, diverse group, and the best way to show respect and deference to who they were and what they struggled with is to actually study them in detail, and that's what we do here at the Friendly Neighborhood History channel. Friendly History is doing a museum tour of UK with myself. Donate and make it happen. Yes, Simon, we are going to do that, and we're going to make that happen, and it's so great to see you. I've been wondering about you. I've been wanting to reach out. I will email you later. If you want to go more in depth talking about a topic with me, or ask me questions, or submit feedback or comments in kind of a more private manner, you can email me at friendlyneighborhoodhistory@gmail.com. We're getting our own domain email soon, but yeah, just in case you want to talk to me about stuff. Say Moo, I want to say that's a real treaty, but I don't know. And it's not Hugh Hefner Jr., it's History Hefner. The smoking jacket turns me into History Hefner. I love Risk, fun board game, very enjoyable. What's really funny? Why does Greenland claim the whole of Greenland is inhabited? Why can't they just have that part they occupy? I don't know. I wouldn't know, Well, probably something technical and political. Opinion on Buddhism. One of the most interesting religions of the world that is also a philosophical branch that has inculcated itself in many different societies through a mainly peaceful means. You look at how Buddhism spread into China and Japan and has become the definitive religions and philosophies of those areas, even though it originally started in India. It's an incredible addendum to Hinduism and a reform of Hinduism in its own way. That's why it was originally founded. Fascinating stuff. And yes, I do know Kobe Bryant. I am a fan. Yes. Do you know anything from 1964? Plenty. Will China back India or Pakistan historically based? I don't know who China will back. They've had some problems with India. India wants Tibet freed, and that angers the Chinese. Did Spain actually force the Andalus Muslims to be Christian? Yes, or leave. It's absolutely true. You are the only one outside of myself who is actually using these streams to make real content. Can immediately say you actually have something to say. Thank you, Bryans. I really appreciate that. So kind of you. You made my day by saying that. Good luck with your final exam. Hopefully it's on history, and hopefully I can help. I think Trump's winning the divorce because people are being more sympathetic. Elon already walked back the whole Epstein files accusation on Trump, and I think it's just stupid. It's just junior high antics and somebody outdoing Trump to Trump. But the truth of the matter is, I don't think it's significant. What's significant is not that a rich man has had a huge experience on a president, huge influence on a president, and then fallen out of contact with him. It's that billionaire, that 1%er, has been so vocal and volatile about it. Believe me, Rockefeller, Morgan, Vanderbilt, Carnegie, the Rockefeller family, the Rothschilds, George Soros. Down the line, you can go throughout American history. There have been huge donors who have had a huge influence on American politics. Elon is just the most brazen and in-your-face one. What's your take on Denmark's role during the Napoleonic Wars, and what if Denmark had sided with the coalition? I think they kind of let Napoleon do what he wanted. I don't know too much, Martin. I'm sorry about their position in that war. I love studying the Napoleonic Wars. I've studied the main players in it, especially from the Russian perspective, and I find it to be fascinating. I'm going to have to study that more and say more later. Hello, Thomas. National Socialism, obviously the moniker of the German Workers' Party, the Nazis. They believe themselves to be National Socialists rather than worldwide socialists, which is what separated them from communists who became their most vicious enemies. No, yes, he bankrupted the empire, but the Byzantine Empire's infrastructure, wealth, and power and security over the Eastern Roman lands was secured because of Justinian. And an emperor getting his kingdom in debt is not uncommon. It doesn't mean that it wasn't a bad thing. Ataturk made Turkey into a nation in the 1920s. Habibu, I absolutely agree. We need to talk more about the Indus River Valley. Why do you wear a night dress with a tie? This is a smoking jacket. I always wear this, and I went to a graduation earlier, so I put on a shirt and tie, and the red matches really nicely. Yeah, the man who invented it didn't want it. The man who brought it didn't need it. The man who needs it doesn't know it. What is it? I don't know. Nice riddle. Can you briefly talk about a nation that you find interesting that is not around anymore? Oh, that's a good one. Rhodesia, although it's changed its name, but it's hard to think about. I like learning about the different Muslim caliphates. So the Abbasids would be one of those ones that engineered the Islamic Golden Age that I would definitely find to be fascinating. They were not only great conquerors, but they solidified the Islamic stronghold over the Middle East and North Africa, while encouraging mounds of learning, art, philosophy, architecture, and Islam was probably at its most culturally and artistically creative moments during the Abbasid Caliphate that doesn't exist anymore. Yeah, let me see here. Thank you for joining us from the British Columbia. Thank you, John. I really appreciate that. I cover Canada. I cover UFO stuff, all of that stuff. I cover everything that has historical weight and measures. And believe me, UFOs have historical weight and measures. You know who I am? Interesting, Levon. Reveal me. Yes, I love the Iroquois Confederacy. One of the first real American republic. 5 different parts of the Iroquois nation. We best know them as the Mohawk Indians, who created the Mohawk, and were known for throwing their tomahawks semicircular. But it was a bunch of different groups. And thank you so much for that donation. I really appreciate that. I'm being as quick as I possibly can. And we are at 8,000 subscribers. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate that. And Marquez is asking, do you believe there were tribes of giants in North America? Most explorers wrote about them, and most Native Americans did too. What I find fascinating about that is whether it's the Nephilim in Scripture, the Anunnaki in the Mesopotamian society, or the tales of different giants and shapeshifters throughout different societies and areas, there definitely seems to be this group of giants, of large people of some variety or strain, who have been testified all throughout human history in all different cultures and mythologies. There's not really a huge amount of historical records that they exist, but the conspiracy and the idea is that they are connected with the buildings of the megaliths like Baalbek, or some of the pyramids in China, South America, or of course the Pyramid of Giza. So obviously there's something to be said there. Human beings have this natural inclination to believe in a religion, to believe in something, in some sort of higher power, but also to believe in giants and what the Bible calls the mighty men of renown. So Marcus, there might have been something to that because it's just all over the place. The Native Americans spoke about it. There's stories of these giant figures occurring in Europe and in the Near East. So there's something to it. Thank you for asking that. Thank you for your donation. I really appreciate it. And if you want your question answered a little more quickly, there's one way to do it. I have done a lot of studies of political science. And yes, 8,000 subscribers, and you can become part of the Friendly Neighborhood History channel by liking and subscribing. Thank you for supporting us from South Africa. We got South Africa in the house. We got Denmark. We got Canada. We've got, what else? Great Britain. 2 of my wonderful moderators are from Great Britain. Yes, thank you, Ginger. I'm so glad to see you again. You always have such great stuff to say. Yes, the Murdoch and Koch brothers, those are definitely ones. Rupert Murdoch basically creating right-wing news media with Fox News and inspiring others like Breitbart and the like. And the Koch brothers, obviously right-wing think tanks, definitely. Did the Umayyads and other Muslim empires force the Christians to be Muslims when they conquered the Iberian Peninsula? No, they did not. They implanted the jizya tax on them, but they also would sometimes draft them into the army. It wasn't like it was perfect religious tolerance, but Al-Andalus was more tolerant in the time of the Umayyads than it was in the time of the Christians in the late 15th century. So yes, we are on our way towards 10,000. My hope is to get by 10,000 by the end of the summer. So we will see here. If we continue to have such great videos and such great people like you joining us for our live streams, we'll get there. So thank you. Thank you, RF. I appreciate that. It's one of my favorite things. It's what I always wear here, and it's not too hot to wear it. The summer might get kind of intense, so we'll see as I take a sip from my tea. What governmental strategic mistake do you think is the most thematic throughout history? Totalitarian authoritarianism. Government overreach has always worried the masses, whether it's a monarch with like King John Lackland having to give up his political power with the Magna Carta, the Russian czars and neo-absolutism, or worries or authoritarianism in Italy and Germany during the Third World War. Yes, I said third, not second. Very good, Harry. If I had more time, I might have been able to think about it, but I'm not good at riddles. Hopefully I've taught you something, RF, since then. And this is a history channel. LAX airports, Amtrak taxes, U-Hauls. I call the police department. I dislike being kidnapped. Oh, sorry about that, Anthony. Hopefully you're okay. Let me see here, catching up with the chat. Support from South Africa, love it. Does learning about history teach you important lessons and value life more? It teaches us, what history teaches us is who we are, where we come from, where we're going. And it also teaches us, it shows us, those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. It shows us the mistakes made in the past. It teaches us about who we are. It teaches us about human nature, the same way that a good book can do that, the same way Shakespeare does that, the same way a good movie teaches us. It gives life to the soul. It's a liberal art. It's a liberating art. It helps us learn who we are and understand our experience as humans better and how things were different and yet still the same. The more things change, the more they stay the same, and that's definitely the case in history. We can talk about UFOs. I just talk about history, and they're obviously part of history. It's funny that they've become part of history predominantly in the 20th century, but happy birthday to you, Gritty. I'm not going to sing because everyone will leave. Why do you think religions like Egyptian paganism and Hellenism did not spread outside their native range, unlike Hinduism despite its age? Hinduism created a social class that was very insular and very much cohesive and very, very unique to the Indian experience. You had a social caste system. You had a political and religious class. Putting the Brahmins at the top of your social caste as the representatives of the god, of the supreme creating god Brahma, allowed Hinduism, through all of its divinations and different worships, to continue to flourish in India even after other mythological polytheistic religions had died out in other areas that became thoroughly invaded by monotheistic religions, be they Christianity or Islam. So I think that you have a lack of exposure to monotheism, but you also have a dependence of the culture on Hinduism, and there are many factions of Hinduism that would consider their religion to be monotheistic. Pantheism, panentheism are huge parts of that, where everything is God or everything contains the God nature. So Hinduism is not as reductive and not as jingoistic as Greek paganism or Egyptian paganism, which end up having superheroes, not gods. Yes. Let me see here. I'm not saying giants definitively existed. I'm saying there's something to that, because every society and culture around the world seems to have these legends. Why? That's what history teaches us, the why. Why do human beings act and feel the same way? Obviously, religion, large buildings, these things are all extremely important for humans, but so are legends of giants and mighty men of renown. I love music. Great to see you as always. This is like a blast from a past. We've got I Love Music here. We've got Simon. Looking very nice and dapper this evening. To what extent will Musk help the Dems despite Trump's warning to stay away from the left? I don't believe that partisanship means anything to an outsider. I don't really see Elon going anywhere with the Democrats. It's not like he automatically became a Democrat. He left the Democratic Party and has definitely gone to the right. His criticism of the big, beautiful bill is because it's not right-wing enough. I don't see Elon doing that. I see him becoming more politically agnostic. The rumor is that he was really spent by all the criticism and involvement and hyper-involvement and over-involvement he had in the Doge system, and he kind of wants to return to making Tesla great again. So I don't know how political he'll be for a while, and I think there might be some sort of reconciliation at some point because the Republicans are going to need his big dollars. Why Indians are put as suffix with Native Americans? Is this a European label to find India? No, Mesosphere. Actually, I used to believe that, but it's actually not true. It's a myth. Columbus called them people in God, Indios, Indian, indigenous. That's where we get that from. India was called Hindustan, or the land of the Hindus at the time. It wasn't called India until later on. So, and thank you, Wild Food. I appreciate that. Hello, Brandon. From South Africa, it's always great to see people. We've got, and Mohammed, thank you. Was Noah's flood real? It's reported in every culture. There's a flood narrative in every culture. There's some sort of giant destruction of the world, and it's a way to explain why is there rain, why is most of the world water, why are there big oceans and seas and lakes near us. It's an ideology, explains the way things are, and that might be the case with the giants as well. So it's a story of an ideology. That's a great question, Mohammed. Thank you for the donation. I don't know that the Yeti exists. Hello, Bike Gang. Is this educational or political? I talk about politics from a historical lens and geopolitics from a historical lens. So if you have a question about any of that, I'll give my best answer to it based on that. But I try to be as informative as possible and as objective as I possibly can be. And if you don't believe me, look at the people who call me a left-wing nutjob and a right-wing conspiracy theorist, and you'll see that people don't like me because they think I'm either a conservative or a liberal in basically the same video or stream. So I did an entire series covering the US election because I knew it would be historical and I didn't think the media was doing its job right. So yeah, one thing I have learned about history is all empires rise and fall. Yes, it will. And you've got hegemonic empires like the United States and China, which are not land empires, but definitely have imperial influence and imperial amounts of wealth and power. If the Russians had pulled out of the Great War following the February Revolution, would the Reds have failed? No. No. I think that the idea that the Bolsheviks took power because the Russians turned against the war isn't true. The Bolsheviks took power by stealing it and then refusing to allow any other political party to have a voice. And what eventually made people like them was that they said the war weariness, the bread lines, that's all going to end. Peace, land, and bread. That was Lenin's promise. It is demagoguery, really. What point in time were we cut off from aliens and when they were noticed in the past and inscribed in stone? You're referring to the Anunnaki of ancient Mesopotamian society, Assyrian society? I don't know. I'm not saying yes or no to any of that. I'm just saying it's fascinating that this is part of the human experience and tradition in all societies, whether they're aliens or giants, powerful beings from beyond the stars or from this world helping develop humankind is something that we see in everything from 2001: A Space Odyssey to the New Testament. So there was a worldwide flood. Knowing if Noah was a direct cause or not isn't really possible with direct historical evidence. Something that happened 5,000, 6,000, who knows how many thousands of years ago, you don't have evidence for it. What do you think of William the Conqueror? Great general, but great generals aren't always great rulers. Napoleon might be an exception to that. William the Conqueror was a good king, but an even greater warrior. Let me see here. How did people in Venice use the same technology for setting foundations like the Aztecs did? I think some of it is common sense, and there's obviously some sort of obviously math is math, whether it's in Mexico and Guatemala or in Italy. I know a bit about Norway. Yes, Otak, great to see you, by the way. Obviously, the Norwegians, along with the Swedish, had an empire, the North Sea Empire, that managed to conquer all of England for a time. Think of Harthacnut and Svein Forkbeard. And one of their rulers was a man named Harold Bluetooth, whose insignia has become Bluetooth. I don't know why he's the inspiration for Bluetooth, or else I would have done a video. From your research, do societies go through cycles of progressivism and conservatism? Absolutely. Traditionalists win, traditionalists control power, progressivism sets in, progressivism wins and controls power. It's a total cycle. Hey, Twitch. Let me see here. None of the UK newspapers are good. I like, which one do I like? The Telegraph? Yes, I like the Telegraph. And the Independent. But that's because I'm a Ted Lasso and Trent Krim fan. That's why I like the Independent. I'm going to take a sip of the tea. If you haven't done so already, please consider liking and subscribing. Why don't you remember before being taught verbal language? I watched as all my peers chose that. It's interesting how that coincides. It's developmental structures at different ages. Let me see here. Is BBC News fairly reliable? Yeah. Those who are filled with the Holy Spirit will raise life. Okay, let's see here. Good conversations in the chat. Every culture has a pyramid. You are very smart. Yes, there's more pyramids in Sudan, Kushnubia, and in South America than there are in Egypt. And you could say that the ziggurats of the Mesopotamians are pyramids. It was all about reaching to the skies and reaching to the gods. Look at Gothic cathedrals in Europe. Notre Dame, Our Lady of Chartres, Cologne, Bologna, all in the same style. Canterbury Cathedral, Westminster. Every culture, do you think we will see the fall of the USA in the near term? I don't know. I hope not. I'm an American. That would suck, whatever it looks like. Yeah. Harry, what? Okay. Let me see here. The Tuskegee experiment, Scipio Africanus, two great historical topics. The Tuskegee experiment is an extremely unfortunate one. Tuskegee was is an all-black institution in the United States and the South, founded by a former slave, Booker T. Washington, who believed the best way for African Americans to achieve full independence, liberty, and equality with whites was to work and achieve. And so he founded Tuskegee as a way to educate former slaves and young blacks to achieve their highest ends and potentials. The Tuskegee experiment was done by the U.S. government in the 1920s and 30s, where they actually infected men with syphilis to see what would happen to them when they had a social disease, and the results were horrifying. It's every bit as terrifying as what the Russians did in Romania at the end of the Third World War with the Nazis, what the Japanese did in Unit 731, and what Mengele was doing. It's interesting that all the different societies of the world in the 1920s and 30s, based on cultural perfectionism, paternalism, and social Darwinism, believing these other people were inferior, did horrifying and terrible experiments all in a contemporary era. Scipio Africanus was the great Roman general who became known as Africanus for defeating the Africans, most notably the Carthaginians at the Battle of Zama, and led to the victory of the definitive Second Punic War. Let me see here. Let me see. Moving on. Who are the real Jews? There are different types of Jews, and I talk about this on ad nauseum here on the channel. But there are Jews from North Africa and Spain who are known as the Sephardim, and there are Jews from the Middle East known as the Mizrahim, and there are Jews from Europe, and that's the majority of Jews, and most Jews you've encountered if you're a Westerner are those types of Jews. Benjamin Netanyahu, Henry Kissinger, and Barbara Streisand are all Ashkenazi Jews. So, let me see here. Glad you guys are talking about British news. I'm learning stuff just by reading the chat. Let me see. Hello, Ishik. Do you think a person can good or bad depending on the country, like Churchill is praised in UK and criticized in colonial countries? Yes, people are definitely have different perspectives given on them in different areas of the world, and Churchill is an excellent example of that. We have to acknowledge that as great as Churchill is for us and for, I'd say, the world, I think Churchill is a net positive figure in world history because of the alternative of the Nazis would have been far more horrifying. His bravery, his foresight was brilliant. His political astuteness, amazing. His speeches, inspiring. Churchill also, not fully his own fault, but micromanaged the economy that led partially to the Bengal famine, which killed 3 million Indians. And so there's a lot of disdain for Churchill in areas like Afghanistan and India and in South Africa because Churchill was part of the Boer War and the fight there. So there's a lot of reason that a lot of people in the world hate Churchill. I get it. I'm not saying it makes him a bad person. I'm saying that must be acknowledged, and I definitely do. Like Aditya is saying. Let me see. Friendly history is great with general prompts. However, let's be kinder and ask more specific cues. Almost 50 viewers. Thank you all so much. I love this channel. Simon, you're so kind. I'm doing my best to answer as much. Not the Bengal. Yeah, Bengal famine. In no way affiliated. You can't bribe me with bread, but bribe me with, a donation would be helpful. But good to see you as always. Churchill, you're asking about Columbus calling the natives Indian. He called them Indian because they were people in Dios, in God, Indian. That's where it comes from. The Hungarian Soviet Republic have realistically survived somehow? No. Look at Emre Nagy, whose birthday is today, in the 1956 revolution. The Hungarians were teetering on the edge of collapse from basically their creation as part of the Soviet sphere of influence. Modern would be, the last 500 years have been considered the modern era. Contemporary is in the last 10, 20 years. Freemasonry obviously gets a lot more attention from conspiracy centers and things like that, but obviously the fact that several American founding fathers and many important intellectuals in the Enlightenment were part of it has obviously led a lot of people to raise their eyebrows. If England was not an island, it would have been invaded a lot more and would have led to a different country conquering America. Most likely, yes. The dominance of the high seas, the creation of the international empire, the spread of British language, culture, and art all throughout the world is because they're an island, because kings like Henry VII and Henry VIII had the foresight to rely on their mercantile and sea power rather than their land power. So, I try to memorize as much information, read, and study in different modes. I look at videos, I read articles, I read books, I do what I can, and I learn stuff from you. And yes, I do love the Swedish Empire. Don't sleep on Gustavus Adolphus or the many different Charles who dominated the Nordic countries during the 17th and 18th centuries. Let me see here. Trying to get through the chat. Where do the modern Ku Klux Klan differ to the older version, and how has their sphere of influence changed? Completely collapsed. They don't do giant marches in Washington, D.C., where the President of the United States basically has to just, with a wink and a nod, let them go, like they did with Calvin Coolidge in the 1920s. So thank you, Sean, for subbing. Would Rome have been a world power longer had Gaius Caesar not been assassinated? No. As much as Harry dislikes it, Augustus was just who the Romans needed to create an actual imperial system, and the Republic was really collapsing and very weak. I love Armenian food. I love Jewish food. Any good journal of daily economics? I look at Forbes and the Financial Times. Has there ever been a nation to recover from a low birth rate? It's happened before, but many empires and strong countries have tended to decline in the past when they were less wealthy than today. Countries that are extraordinarily wealthy tend to have lower birth rates. The United States is going through that right now. Some Muslims say their early conquest of the Roman Persian Empire was extremely impressive, while some Christians say it wasn't impressive. Was it true? What is true here historically? It was an impressive conquest to destroy, both of those empires were in decline, but to completely wipe out the Sassanid Persians, something the Romans could never have done, and then to weaken and cripple the Eastern Roman Empire and seize the Holy Land from them was quite impressive. And then to seize Egypt, which was their breadbasket, and to put them basically in their own little dark ages for a few centuries. The Rashidun and Umayyad caliphates deserve a lot of credit for that. Were they dealing with weaker empires? Yes. But was their conquest any less impressive because of that? No. What do you want to be when you grow up? They lied to you, man. This. I want to be this. Why did the Huns' influence recede in Europe? They didn't have a cohesive leadership system after Attila died. A few what-if moments that could have changed history. Lincoln not getting assassinated, Kennedy not getting assassinated, starting to see a pattern here. Caesar not getting assassinated, still the pattern. Napoleon not invading Russia, Jesus not dying on the cross, Islam staying in Arabia after the conquest of Mecca. Why did the Jews kill Jesus? Jewish leaders, probably jealous of Jesus's rising influence and not believing and hating the idea that he would call himself a Messiah and not try to raise a rebellion against the Romans, as was common with figures like Bar Kokhba a century later, used the Roman strictures of government to crucify him. What do you think about the Mughal Empire, in particular Aurangzeb, also tolerant of Hindus or not? The Muslims in India, the Mughal Empire, knew it was outnumbered by the Hindus and did everything they could to be very tolerant of them. This did not take away the constant tensions between Hindus and Muslims, with entire militant wings of Hinduism being created to stave off the Muslims and later the British. The Mughal Empire is extraordinarily impressive. Babur, Shah Jahan, Akbar the Great. You can think of many great rulers. Sikhism is a creation in Punjab during the Mughal Empire, the dominant empire in India for centuries, an empire that too many people sleep on. Why did Britain give back all of Hong Kong when not all of it was the lease agreement, some we actually owned? As a show of good nature to give the Chinese back a part of their country that was full of native Chinese people who spoke Chinese. So, yes, it was. It's not anti-Semitic to say that the Jewish leaders did kill Jesus and that Jews were part of that, but to say the Jewish people all deserve the guilt of that has been one of the most anti-Semitic tropes in history, and it's absolute nonsense. And T.I., thank you for joining us. We have people who are Arab, we have people who are white, we have people who are African. We love the diversity here at the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel. Yes. And yes, please smash the like button and consider subbing. You don't have to scream that, Cookie, but I appreciate it. Would the world be a safer place and better living if one country controlled the whole world? I don't know. The United States might agree with you. And let's see here. And thank you, Mo, for that. I appreciate that. Yes, I like hippos too. Back to Baltic stuff. Would anything have changed should Estonia and the White Army have captured St. Petersburg during the Estonian Independence War? Probably. There's another good what if. What if the Soviet Union collapsed because of that? I would say the truth of the matter, though, is that the holdout by the Finns and the Lithuanians against the Soviets, as long as they did, is what's impressive. Not that the Soviets conquered them, but it took so long. And yeah, the viewers, the super chat, I really appreciate everyone for the support. I'm trying to catch up to your questions. If you haven't done so, please like and subscribe. Drop a topic or comment you're interested in. We've got about another, I'm going to go a little over because I didn't finish a full hour yesterday. So you guys got yourselves an extra 15 minutes. So we've got a half hour to go. And if you're enjoying this, like and subscribe. Did you err earlier in your World War III reference? No, I love music. I've developed this theory recently. I don't know if I've ever expressed it to you. I've got a video on the 7 Years' War and a live stream lecture where I explicate it. But basically, I believe that the 7 Years' War of the 1750s and 60s, with fighting that involved some of these guys, the Native Americans, is the First World War. And that means the Great War is Second World War, and the Nazis are World War III. Hello, Tyler. Do you subscribe to any particular school of historiography? I'm generally a moderate in many of the different schools of historiography. I love history from below, but I don't believe in only telling history from below. I do believe history is written by the victors, but I don't always believe in throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I like to conserve. I'm conservative in the notion of conserving different ideas that we have about history and not just going wild with a new strain or something like that. But I'm a moderate in that I want to acknowledge that we can learn moral lessons from history, but I don't like at the same time, I don't like the rush to judgment over every historical figure. So I tend to be very moderate. I have a bachelor's and master's in history. Do you think 90s was the golden period according to you, the current time period? Yes, I would agree because I was born in the 90s. I probably should have I doubt anyone would think that I'm in my early 20s, so 2000s is out, and I doubt anyone would think I'm in my 30s. I hope you don't think I'm in my 30s, so the 80s are out. So yes, I'm a 90s baby, whatever that means. Yes, but Caesar attempted to change the republic so it could survive, or Augustus just get away with the republic altogether like a dimwit. Yes, it wasn't a dim-witted thing. It was the right thing to do. Look at how corrupt the republic had become. Harry, I'm sorry, but Augustus Caesar reigned for 44 years, dealing with the Senate when Julius Caesar couldn't do it for more than 5. And Tiberius is hated on too much. He's not a good emperor. He's not underrated, but he's hated on too much. Just look at Spectrum's video on it. He goes into a lot of detail. I am not Jewish, but I have affinity for all types of people, and I would encourage all people, Jewish and Gentile, to like and subscribe if they haven't done so yet. Someone told me last week that Churchill's iconic speech was said by a sound double, as he was apparently preoccupied. I feel he said this to annoy me. However, this man who told me is very educated. That just sounds like one of those theories just to undermine a basic understanding we have, and I don't like it. Would World War II still have happened without the Austrian painter? World War III, probably not, but anti-Semitism, there had to be a reckoning with Europe and anti-Semitism, and who knows how that would have happened and what that could have looked like. The Germans had definitely gotten the raw end of the deal, but I don't like to believe that history is an inevitable conclusion one way or another, so I'm not going to just automatically say that it was going to happen after the Treaty of Versailles. Germany was actually pretty stable throughout most of the 20s, thanks to the United States and Great Britain. Do we see globally that when colonial UK, but that's a good what if, Rob, what would have happened without Hitler? Do we see globally that when colonial UK left, it created or divided a nation like Israel, Africa? That happened in places. Obviously, the biggest damage that the Europeans ever did to Africa was not even colonialism. It was cutting up Africa into squares and different angles to appease different powers, be they Germany, France, Britain, Portugal, Italy, or Spain, or the Belgians who took over the Congo and just decimated those poor people. Look at what Leopold II did, an absolutely evil man. I'm sorry, I don't like to make moral judgments all the time in history, but I can say people like Stalin, Hitler, and Leopold II are evil. It's not too far of a reach for me to say that. So I do like to make some definitive moral statements, but not all the time, and I do understand the victim of the time narrative. But at the same time, the biggest damage to Africa that the Europeans did was to cut it up into areas and leave different tribes and put different tribes of people with each other that didn't get along, and cut out people who had worked together for a long time, irrespective of African influence or cultural or ethnic backgrounds and identities. And that is obviously a huge problem. The Europeans thought they could just do that in Israel and Palestine, and in Pakistan and India, and it doesn't always work out. It seems logical, but it doesn't necessarily fit that area of the world. If the whole Earth was all the same temperature as Nigeria, would everyone be black? I don't know. An interesting what if. Sub-Saharan, obviously there's adaptation. I don't know exactly. Have you always been into history? Yes, I have. Ever since I was like 6 or 7, so I've been studying this for quite some time. Britain colonizing, I'm not saying it was a good thing. I'm saying the worst part of it was the divisions of these African countries and of Asian countries that are still not been figured out. Look at what happened in Rwanda because of it. So I was thinking about the other day, why did France start to lose in the Hundred Years' War, and was Spain and Scotland involved? Scotland and France had been on the same side with each other because the French had helped Scotland gain their independence. Look at Robert the Bruce, whose death anniversary is today, the real Braveheart. Obviously, he had received assistance from the French to undermine the English. It was the Burgundians who weakened the French, and they had an insane king, Charles VII. He was insane. He was mentally ill. Charles VI, I shouldn't say insane, but clearly mentally ill, believed he was made of glass. And the English under Henry V, one of the greatest rulers in European and English history, who only ruled for a short time, were able to do. Hindus definitely were one of the first. Hindus spurred the growth of Indus. Yes, they did. Why do you think there are so little historical accounts for Alexander the Great? It's hard to get historical accounts that are directly there in the BC period. Almost all historical records from that time are written centuries later or corroborated centuries later, and the earliest histories are oral traditions that are compiled by writers later. So one of the best examples of this is Herodotus, who literally just collected oral histories until he had a cohesive historical narrative. Why do we see there is constant community that is hated in each nation? Otherness, xenophobia, is part of who we are. That's why xenophobia is from the ancient Greek word for xenon, who was I think, an alien or a stranger. I'm trying to remember. Was Khalid. That's why there's warnings in the Old Testament and other religious texts that are thousands of years old about being good to foreigners and treating them well, because it's a knee-jerk reaction to be suspicious of people who are different. Was Khalid ibn al-Walid that impressive and terrific as a warrior? Some say he's top 3. I'm trying to remember who he was exactly. I'm going to say yes. Muslim warriors were pretty great. Baal sucks, great to see you. Do you think Sweden would have beat Russia in the Great Northern War if they hadn't chose to target Poland after getting so close to their capital? Yes, that was a huge mistake, but that was because they thought the Russians were backward. For a century, the Polish and Swedish, Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth and the Swedish have basically bullied the Russians consistently ever since the Polish had captured Moscow in 1610. So the Russians were seen as second-rate to these two very powerful European nations, and Peter the Great surprised them by taking all the European power and implements, attaching it to his armies, attaching it to his navy, attaching it to his architecture, art, and economics, and using that just to whoop the Swedish at Poltava. Who is one of the most influential Sikh Punjab warrior during the Caliphate? I don't know exactly. I wouldn't be able to say. Sikhism develops as a response, I believe it's a monotheistic religion, as a response in syncretism with Islam, Christianity, and Hinduism and Buddhism all being present in India. Do you believe that National Socialism had any merit if you remove the death camps? I believe that if you look at it, basically it was drafting everybody to war and then mobilization of the economic factor. They basically brought unemployment down to nothing by doing what they did in the United States. It's when you draft everybody into the military and then basically force people to work in factories, you can get zero unemployment. Goering copied it from Stalin. The 5-year plans became the 4-year plans. I don't think that they really did anything good in that sense, other than what other authoritarian governments do to make sure everybody is working. Basically force them to work in a place they may not want to and may not be productive because of that. Do you think Hitler died easily considering the number of people he killed? I don't know what was running through that man's mind at any given point. He was on a bevy of different medications and drugs and was clearly off his rocker by 1944, let alone 45, when the war was clearly ended. I do my best, Corzo. I appreciate that. It's good to see you again, by the way. In 10,000 years, could they be a weapon that would be tested and end up being 100,000 more powerful and could erase life? I don't think it's going to take 10,000 years. I think it could take like 100. The way technology is developing, it's crazy. Nation-state concept arrives in the 17th century after the 30 Years' War, where basically the people who live in an area, form a government there, get to have that area and don't get to have it violated and taken over by another country. I don't know what Hinduism is doing in Indonesia. Indonesia is a Muslim majority country. Do you miss the 90s? Yes. I think a lot of people do. What was freedom of speech like in the Roman Empire? There was definitely a lot of toleration. I think the best example of freedom of speech is the religious diversity that the Roman people had. And obviously, if you were a citizen, you had a lot more freedom and you could get involved in politics. So there was freedom of speech there. This was restricted during the imperial days if there was outspokenness against emperors. Even during the Republic, when there were dictators like Sulla, Marius, or Caesar, obviously free speech was restricted. It wasn't anything close to what we have today, where this concept of people can say basically anything they want, but it did exist in the Roman Empire, believe it or not, and in the Delian League Empire of the Athenians. Yeah. Americans would have sided with Germans due to racism if the companies didn't lose trade routes. There were some Americans who felt that way, but no. America's connection in the Angloid world to the British sphere of influence and Canada was too much for them to side with the Nazis. Didn't Germany experience massive? Yes, they did. But by the late 20s, Gustav Stresemann, the Dawes Plan, the German mark had recovered by 1925, 1926, and Germany was encountering the Roaring Twenties just like the British, French, and Americans were. The reason the Great Depression affected the whole world was because the American economy had become the predominant power along with the British. I know this is difficult to answer, but what empire at its peak was the greatest overall? I'd say the Abbasids. I don't think the Abbasids were the greatest. I think they're one of the most interesting and underrated, but not the greatest. The British probably are the default. They controlled the largest amount of the human population and had land in basically every continent except Antarctica, so I'd have to go with the British Empire. So you Brits do not really recall Thatcher fondly. Some of them do. How is forming a country for them a bad thing? The Romans did the same thing with the Celts and Germanics, W-based. Yeah. It's all a matter of perspective, because the irony kaleidoscope is that people in the West have fallen in love with this idea of self-determination, where people should be able to determine their own fates and futures based on their own ethnic and cultural ties. And that was violated in the colonization and decolonization efforts of the European empires of the 40s and the 50s. What's the less popular period of history that you think deserves more attention? The 1600s. We just don't talk about it as much as we do, especially like in Europe and in Africa. How has Muslims treated Jews? It seems to me that every culture and group, be they paganic Romans, be they Christians, be they secular societies, have to go through this period, seemingly strangely enough, of dealing with their anti-Semitism. And it seems like Islam in the Middle East today is going through it, where in the past they were much more stable and fair in their treatment of Jews. That has obviously changed with organizations like Hamas and Hezbollah. Let me see here. If Germany hadn't declared war on the USA after the Pearl Harbor bombing, would the United States go after Japan first? Yes, and they actually did. Look at the war in the Pacific and how it was going. They were already, Guadalcanal, Midway, the Philippines. This had already taken place by the time the U.S. landed in Normandy, which just passed, by the way, the 81st anniversary. Birds immigrate thousands of miles. Why can't we allow people to migrate freely? Earth belongs to the world. That's a good question, but birds are not humans, and it's much easier for them to travel and a lot harder to catch them when they are traveling. Would Japan and Germany have been far superior if not blown up in World War III? Thank you for calling it World War III, but it's up to you, whatever you think it is. World War II or World War III, I don't discriminate. Germany continually through the 20th century was strong, and the fear of what they could do at their best potential or worst potential led to it being divided after that war. Japan recovered thanks to America basically taking over and telling them what they were going to do, and that was the quid pro quo. You support us in the Cold War, or we will not support you in rebuilding. Let me see here. Let me see. Did they kill Jews in Palmyra? Was it legal, and what time was it happening? I'm trying to remember what that was. Palermo. Is that Spanish? I think it might be. Khalid ibn Walid is the military tactician who helped win pretty much all battles. Oh, I think I've heard of him before. I have not played that game. Do you think Turkey will ever admit to the Armenian genocide? They kind of are. They're moving in that direction. They've acknowledged that hundreds of thousands of Armenians died. The pressure from the West, Biden was the first president to acknowledge it, seems to be working. I haven't played those games, but I should play them. They sound good. As the Ethiopians beat back the Italians in the first Italo-Ethiopian War, do you think they could have done in the second Italo-Ethiopian War as well if they played their cards differently? Yes, but the use of chemical weapons really did them in. The Italians were ruthless in the second Italo-Ethiopian War. The first one, Menelik had been able to deceive the Italians. The second one, Haile Selassie, did not have that clout, and Italy was way too overpowered. Republicans definitely don't believe in the Constitution. They are first to censor and crack down on free speech. Ask the AP. Some say Al-Andalus being the greatest civilization is a huge myth, while some exaggerate its greatness, which is true. Al-Andalus was a strong and prosperous civilization. It wasn't the greatest. I don't know who that is. I hope that's a compliment. I'm from the United States, so when do you think World War III will happen, and how will humanity look after it? Both best. I already think it happened. I don't know what it's going to look like, and I don't know when the next war will be. World War IV. What do you think the chances of an oligarch-fueled civil war being used to create companies, cities, realms? Some people say, well, it's already happening, Rosalind. And some say it's just an ongoing struggle between classes. Has Christianity been distorted after the King James Bible was introduced? I don't think so. Christianity being distorted and reinterpreted is just part of its history, as it is with any religion. How a slave defeated the Romans. You're thinking of Spartacus and his revolt, highly exaggerated how successful he was, but the truth of the matter was Spartacus took advantage of a weak and declining Roman Republic in the beginning of the 1st century BC to basically carve out a niche for him for a while and defeat the Romans on several occasions. As I enjoy more of my tea. This is my special custom-made whiskey cigar glass. I have tea in it right now, but it has my name and my channel's name inscribed on it. I got it for being a groomsman a few months ago. The Nazis were the ones who declared war on the Americans anyway, so scenario the Americans not joining would require a change of heart. Yeah, that's true. Why the wall play an important role in human civilization even today, like borders? Borders have been, I mean, as much as people want to talk about how amorphous borders have been in the past, and there has been this give and take, migration, settling borders, creating a foundation, civilizational deadlines between them and another civilization are part of human history. That's just how people have identified how societies and cultures have existed, and sometimes that's been more subjective than at other points. How are early maps drawn? You look at some of the old maps, and I'm not a cartographer, but they definitely did not include the New World, for instance. The process, I don't know a huge amount about that, but good question. Why we see that Islam treat badly, to the female person. I don't know if that's always true. I think there's Wahhabism in radical Islam in the Middle East that has definitely subjected women to things that us in the West could not imagine, but that's almost a cultural fight-off. But then again, some of the treatments, female genital mutilation and the like, are obviously quite awful. Let me see. 15 minutes. So I'm 15 minutes behind. That's just great. We have 15 more minutes. And chat did get super loaded. We had a lot of people here today. I'm going to try to answer a little more quickly, but we got another 15 minutes. I'm giving you an extra 15 minutes, so please like and subscribe if you haven't and think of a topic. Yeah. Interwar period. Let's see. Did the British conquer the world by having better cannons and military? Does that mean in the future, if a country has more advanced military, they could take over the world? Yes. But the British did it with their great navy. Hello, Tom. If the Muslims conquered the whole of Spain and didn't lose it, could they have conquered the rest of Europe? They didn't lose Spain. They lost to the French at Tours and Poitiers, 732, Charles Martel. That was why they had to settle for Spain. And then the divide between the Umayyads and Abbasids meant the Umayyads would control Spain, and the Abbasids took North Africa, and they never had the ability to go back into France. Do you people downplay the Africa considering the diversity? What do you mean by you people? I think the Muslims had a better chance at conquering Europe at Vienna. The Scandinavians would have come to save the Franks. Yes, that's very true, but it was Jan Sobieski who defeated the Muslim forces, the Ottoman forces at Vienna in September 11th, 1586, I think is the year, and that is why September 11th was in the minds of Al-Qaeda in 2001. Thank you for joining us from the UK. Tartaria, I've just actually finally heard about this. I always thought you were referring to the Tartars, the ones who oppressed the Russians. Check out my series on Russian history if you want to learn more about the Tatars, who were subsidiaries of the Mongols who controlled their different khanates in Central Eurasia. But it's actually Tartaria. That's the idea of this ancient civilization that was extremely overpowered. It's similar to the Atlantis thing. I think it's just a myth Atlantis was a myth people in the ancient world used to salve their ideas of an advanced civilization. Tartaria is what modern people do to salve their ideas of an advanced civilization in the past. Barbarossa, no. Lifeline, I don't believe Operation Barbarossa nor Napoleon's invasion of Russia were necessarily lost from the start. The Russians came close to losing in both encounters. If the Germans had pressed only in on one city, preferably Stalingrad, the Soviets would have collapsed. I don't know if Italy has returned to fascism. They don't seem that fascistic. It wasn't Northern Spain. Objectively speaking overall, what race is the best? Oh my goodness. Mohammed, you've asked some great questions. That I'm not answering. I don't think any race is the best. I think that we've lost the sense of individuality that makes us best. It's not about race. I think what's really, and I saw a good video about this that I'm going to upload as a short, but I think people really underestimate the importance of technology. Technology has created the whole racial issue. It used to be tribalism, now it's racism. Those are creations of technology, allowing people to encounter each other and, once again, fear the xenon, the other. Yeah, was family unity a lot more closer thousands of years ago, like in the modern days? People don't spend enough time with parents. Yes, that's definitely true. Communal families living in multiple generations was the case in ancient societies because you needed to stick together to survive. Thank you for joining us from Norway. Ashkenazi Jews are some of the most successful in the world. Hello, Otter. Great to see you. Hello, Nugs. Some longtime friendly neighborhood historians are here. And if you haven't become a friendly neighborhood historian, it's as easy as liking and subscribing. And thank you again to, I believe it was Mohammed and, oh, geez, why am I forgetting who donated? Thank you so much for the donations. They really help the channel grow. How much effect does piracy at sea have on history? I think pirates are kind of overrated. There's always been piracy on sea. Greek pirates are from Mycenae and Crete are probably the ones who destroyed Troy in the first place in the 12th century BC. Sir Francis Drake, his privateering. Captain Morgan obviously creates kind of the modern idea of the pirate. And you have the golden age of pirating with Captain Kidd and Blackbeard in the early 1700s. And Beauharnais, one of the well-known female pirates. So yeah. And hello, Virginia. Thank you for joining us. Do you think Jews deserved Hitler? No. Why do people even come and ask questions like that when they know I'm not going to say what race is best or if Jews deserve the Holocaust? Some people's minds sometimes. No offense, King Viscount, but seriously. It was pretty clear by the speed of the comments deletion that it was an auto-delete. I hate no religion. Absolutely not. What do you think about the firing of Belisarius? Probably a mistake. Belisarius is the main reason that Justinian conquered most of the Western Roman Empire and tried to turn and almost got the Mediterranean back to being a Roman lake. The bubonic plague kept him from maintaining that. Also, his massive spending. I think colonialism is bad in the sense of violating people's sovereignty. I think there are some benefits to it that people need to acknowledge historically if we're going to be honest, but I don't think that makes it worthwhile. If I manage to crash my car into somebody's house and take all of their stuff, which is what colonialism is in many ways, kind of a crass analogy, it doesn't matter if the insurance helps them rebuild a nice new wall or I get a new car out of it. It's still a bad thing for me to do. Or if I leave something nice for them, that doesn't necessarily make it okay. Chattel slavery wasn't because of technology. Chattel slavery existed in that time period and then was expanded by the Europeans when they brought slaves from Africa to the United States and to South America. There are more slaves in South and Central America than in the United States. But Moped, just to clarify what I was saying, people have been enslaving each other as long as human history exists. Interracial enslavement, interracial activity is because of technology. The technological advances of the Europeans allowed them to go to Africa, trade, and eventually get involved in the slave trade. Yes. Thank you, King Viscount. Thank you, King Vicious. You're not the first troll that I've won over. Let me see. Tortilla was marked on old maps. 1700s, a large country which stretched down to the Black Sea. It became less. So the legend of Tartaria is the conspiracy theory around it. That was one of the Khanates of the Tartars, who were a people, or Tatars, who were a group who oppressed the Russians, the Muscovites, in the 14 and 1500s. I have talked about them quite a bit. They declined in power and influence as they were swallowed up by the Russians and by other empires. But some of their Khanates lasted well into the 19th century. Thank you, Jay Will. This is my smoking jacket. It turns me into History Hefner, and this is my nice, what I love about this whiskey glass isn't just that it has my channel inscribed on it, but it also has a holder for my cigar if I wanted to smoke. And I'm not smoking in the channel yet, but yeah. I've heard about that republic, don't know a lot about it. Potatoes actually came from South America, and they brought them to Europe because the soil could actually make them not poisonous. Tomatoes, I don't know, they're Mediterranean, I think. I like to think they're Mediterranean. That's where, you have Shirazi salad and the Italians love tomatoes. What inspired you to do YouTube? It was my girlfriend at the time who told me, I was going to tell her one day, Sarah, that I was going to say, I can name every king and queen of England in order from the Norman Conquest till now. And she said, why aren't you doing this on YouTube or TikTok? And I was like, well, I don't really like TikTok, although I will get a TikTok very soon for this channel. It will help us grow. So I decided to start doing YouTube. And then one day, President's Day weekend of 2024, so a little over a year and a quarter ago, I was walking our dogs and I decided to do a couple of videos. And I was amazed the next day to see that one of the videos had gotten like 500 views, which I now know isn't that much for a short, but I was really impressed that 500 people had actually seen me and enjoyed what I had to say. It might have been 400. And so I was like, hey, I've got to start doing this. And that's where And that's how it started. And then the live stream started that following summer. So, let me see here. Thank you, King. I appreciate that. I've turned a troll into an ally. I've done it before. I had one guy come here once and he said, I'm just here to make your life a living hell. And then afterward, I was like, actually, you know what you're talking about. Like and subscribe. Yeah, so the Muslim pirates that people are referring to, sometimes called the Barbary pirates, although there are different iterations of them, were known for assailing European ships in the Mediterranean, stealing them and enslaving some of their sailors. And this actually lasted for a long time. It was even American sailors who came under fire for this, and that is why the Barbary Coast War happened. It's the first American military conflict in the early 1800s. Yeah. In Italy, the majority of people have supported Putin since 2014. They are Italians in the Russian ranks. Why? Well, the return of fascism can be seen with the thugs who take revenge. Interesting, Nobis. I did not know that. Thank you for telling me that. Why did Americans not castrate their slaves like Ottomans? You don't have to yell by typing all caps, but the reason why is it's inhumane, but slavery is also inhumane. The Ottomans didn't castrate all their slaves, but they castrated a group of them, male slaves, because they wanted them to work in the harems and close to the emperor. These were known, and sometimes they were put in the military, and they were known as janissaries. They didn't want young Christians reproducing, but oftentimes these Christians would become Muslims anyways, so it didn't matter. But if they were interacting with the Sultan, they would be close to his harem, which included many wives and concubines, and so they didn't want them to ever become aroused near them. They wanted them to focus strictly on serving the emperor. Yeah. What role did the wall play in today's world? Walls are everywhere. What role does a wall play in a gated community or in like a building? I mean, I just love that question. Yes, we love Muslims. I don't know anything about Islam or the Quran, so can't help there. What's your goal? Yes, Simon, I love Islam, and I know a little bit about the Quran and the history of Islam. Check out my long-form video on the history of Islam. Simon, if you could look that up and put that in the chat, and the social medias if you haven't already, that would be helpful as we wrap up things. We got about 5 more minutes. Did the ancient Greeks have close relations to the ancient Indians? Not specifically, no. Captain Morgan. Henry Morgan, the inspiration for the rum, was an English captain who helped King Charles II and the English increase their power and influence over. He was a privateer known for his cruelty, and he helped them take Jamaica away from the Spanish in the 1600s. He was particularly close with King Charles II. Do you believe Michael Ney lost Waterloo for Napoleon by losing most of all elite heavy cavalry in an idiotic mass attack? That and Field Marshal Blucher doesn't get the love he deserves. Your discussion has been very elucidating. I've subscribed. Glad I came across your channel. Good night. Mo, take care. Is it accurate to say the big threes of ancient human civilizations are Mesopotamia, Egypt, Indus? Those are 3 of them, but I guess if you're distinguishing between ancient and classical, yes, but you've got to throw out the Shia in China. You have to think about Greece, and you have to think about Rome, unless you want to say those are classical societies, but the Shia in China were 2,000 years before Christ was born, so. Do I smoke weed, bro? No, I do not. I like pipes and cigars, and if you want to see me smoking, check out my live stream lecture on Churchill. Me and Simon had a great time that day talking about Winston Churchill and his influence and his rise to power, and I was smoking a cigar the whole time. I do not partake of the devil's lettuce, but I don't judge you if you do. I only judge if you don't subscribe. JK. Yes, the Ottomans had a lot of slaves. In fact, the Arab slave trade started partly with the Ottomans. Were there black people here before the slave trade? No. We need to talk about the good aspects of colonialism, but I think I know where you're going on this. So, yes, I'm not saying that colonialism is good. I'm saying the development of infrastructure, railroads, political peace, education. Gandhi and Mandela were European educated. Ho Chi Minh quotes the Declaration of Independence because he has an education. So the very education that the Westerners provided their colonials actually allowed them to undo the colonial system by appealing to Western values of democracy, liberty, and independence. So people were married in tribal ceremonies. Religious ceremonies were important for marriage. Regulations of marriage wasn't that common. It was more about mating and breeding just to survive. Oh wait, Evan's here? I have not seen any of Evan's comments yet. Wow, I'm surprised he's not here, and he's here and I did not see him. Sorry, Evan. Usually you and I have nice back and forth, but I guess today Simon just decided to take care of it. Thank you, Simon. I didn't know it was Evan saying that I'm an Islamophobe, which I'm not. I'm not afraid of anyone, least of all Evan. Let me see here. Trying to catch up with the chat. Can you go into further details of what took place in the gates of Vienna? Trying to remember exactly what that was. I can't think of it right now. Is that gates of Vienna? Is that the Anschluss when the Nazis took over in 1938? With the Austrians really wanting that? If mobiles were not invented or cameras, the print press, would there be more wars as it would be easier to get away with it? Probably not. Have fun, King. Have fun lighting up. Was Magellan's enslaved Filipino Malay man, Enrique, the first to circumnavigate the globe? He's one of the first. I am a teacher, actually. Let me see. I'm catching up with the chat. Tomatoes are from Americas and lots of other foods, and tomato paste from America. There are tomatoes in America that are grown in America, but they have tomatoes before the Americans. I don't know, Mohammed. I've answered all your other questions. That one is a little bit above my pay grade. And yes, if you want to read some of my articles, check out my Substack. You can also check out my social medias that are pinned in the chat, thanks to my wonderful moderator, Simon the Bunny. If you want to join and donate, you can get access to my First Lady series and early access on my Patreon, or you can become a member and join here and get early access to my short content and videos. This is the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel, God Killer, where I talk about history and social studies in a friendly, neighborly manner, wearing my smoking jacket, drinking my tea, and enjoying my evening. Yes, Muhammad, I believe you're very well. It's good to see you, and you're very well, versed. Any last super chats? I'm just so happy the channel's monetized. Yes, we've been on that making, but we're on the road to the second tier with ad revenue and stuff like that, and all the money goes towards building up this channel, getting better technology, getting better mics, getting better lighting, all of that stuff to make this experience more and more enjoyable for all of you guys. The Americans are a diverse group, so it's not exactly a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant country anymore. You've got Catholics, you've got non-white people, you've got interracial marriage, you've got a lot of diversity in America. Yeah, wooden pipes are great. British and Indian history. I've talked about it a lot, Ankit. Britain colonizes India under the East India Company. Robert Clive of India in the 1750s, wins a bunch of battles during the 7 Years' War, or as I like to call it, World War I. And eventually the Indians fall into the sphere of the British East India Company, which is overthrown, and the British take over in 1858. And then they divide the Indian subcontinent into West and East Pakistan versus India in 1947. In 1971, East Pakistan becomes Bangladesh. Hey there, I don't know. Maybe it's the tie and the robe. They work together. Let me see here. Thank you, Mohammed. I appreciate that. I talk about all types of history and all types of societies and all types of cultures, including religion. So religion's part of that. And that means Christianity as well. Let me see. What do historians think about current politics? China, for example, goes to the third world countries, build expensive stuff. Raki, stop using the all caps. Yeah, T is W. What do you think about the colonial narrative of Algeria's history denying any form of statehood before French colonialization? I think it's just a way to reject the past and to move on and to show spite to the French. But the French really loved Algeria. They loved having Algeria as part of their sphere. That's why they fought the Algerian War of the 50s. That's why they decolonized in Côte d'Ivoire, but not there. And yes, Chicaz, you are an esteemed gentleman as well. I don't think bananas are extinct. Why is the Marshall Plan so important to Western Europe in the Cold War? It's the way the United States created a sphere of influence and eventually NATO to combat the Soviets and stop the spread of communism. It rebuilt the infrastructure and economies of Britain, France, and Italy and West Germany and kept them from falling under the Iron Curtain. Any idea about what other people in Europe were doing during Greek best time? There were Celtic tribes that migrated throughout Germany, France, and the British Isles. You also have the Etruscans, who were the predominant power in northern and central Italy during this time. Rome was just kind of a little village in many respects to it, and the Greeks actually had several settlements in Italy and Sicily called Magna Graecia. So there's a little bit about what's going on in those areas. And the Carthaginians eventually settled in Spain and created the first major civilizations there. And we have caught up to the chat for once. But yes, Chekhov, what do you know about the megaly idea? I don't know enough about it. Why are we scared of spiders and not ants? People are scared of ants, but spiders are considered to be more dangerous because they can bite and be poisonous. The early days of Canada. Well, are you referring to the First Nations, which I have up here in this map, or are you referring to various, and there was actually a lot of migration of First Nations peoples between The 49th parallel didn't exist in their book. So there's many First Nation tribes like the Nez Perce who are known for being in the Pacific Northwest. That includes British Columbia. The Sioux, when they were being chased by the American government, went into Canada for quite some time. The Huron and the Ontario, these are all native tribes. Many of the names for the Great Lakes and many of the provinces like in in Canada as well as in America are named after Indians. So, Tarib, great to see you as always. What happened in the native population of Canada? What happened there happened in most parts of the Western world. Disease, warfare, and dispossession led to the deaths of millions of people. I've heard that story before. In Australia, that fear is highly advantageous. I can imagine. But early days of Canada eventually was settled by the French in Quebec and the British in, I'm trying to remember exactly, Ontario? Why am I wrong? Newfoundland, areas like that. They eventually fight. The French lose, 7 Years' War, and eventually the British are able to assume dominance over all of Canada. In 1840, they give Canada the right to politically autonomize, and then in the 1980s, Canada becomes a fully independent country, but it's still part of the Commonwealth. India is exactly divided, North India being poor and fighting on behalf of religion, and South India becoming prosperous and being equally treated. I've seen that, Adish. I've heard about that. Meghal's idea was the Greek nationalist movement during World War I. They wanted to seize Thrace and Constantinople. Well, that explains why Gallipoli and why they were involved in helping the Europeans. Yes. Why didn't the Russians sell Alaska to British Canada? They didn't want to help the British. Right after the Crimean War, it made no sense. And it's great to see you. Mr. Mamar, it's great to see you. Who was more ancient DNA, Palestinians or Israelis? Both, as a matter of fact, have some ties to those lands. I know that's a trick question meant to say that the Palestinians they actually have a lot of shared DNA. There's a lot of Semitic, that's why they're both Semitic groups, believe it or not. Have Muslims treated Christians and Jews well in their caliphates and empires? Sometimes not. Look at the Janissaries. Look at what I was just talking about with the Ottomans. It's a rotating door. I love these gotcha questions that are meant to make us think that the Muslims are always tolerant and peaceful and thinking and the Christians are not. No. There are times of prosperity and tolerance in Islam and in Christianity. There are times of horrible anti-Semitism in Christianity and in Islam. I'm sorry, Evan, I didn't mean for you to get blocked. I think it was because you were inciting violence. So I got through all the chat and I was able to hear a bunch of other people's perspectives. I'll be happy to answer any of your questions. We'll finish with you. Let me see here. And yes, stirring up a debate about that is always not fun. So Mr. Manor, be careful. Why was the Mughal Empire divided? Was that a tactic the white man used to take over and steal resources? I love how everything is white man this, white man that with you. No, not at all. The Mughal Empire was in a serious decline by the 1700s when the Europeans, the French, the British, and the Dutch show up. The Maratha Confederacy had basically told the Mughal emperors they didn't care, but they were in charge anymore. The Mughal emperor had become very much a figurehead and did not have the power. That's why the Mughal Empire technically lasts till 1858 when the British take over India, because the British affirmed his superiority, but really he had no power. They had been in decline for centuries. I know a little Nigerian history, just a little bit. Ricky, I do not believe there is gold. I'm sorry, son. I'll be back later, Macones. I just got to get the milk. Yes, the creation of Pakistan was extremely controversial. Why is Greenland not independent? Part of it is that it was the Danish wanted a settlement that had a historical tie to the Vikings. Eric the Red. Yes. Tell me about the Khazar Empire, please. Do they still exist and how their empire declined? I actually don't know a lot about them, to be honest with you. There's things I don't know about. I believe they were an empire in Central Asia. They were Muslim. They were a Khanate, meaning they had derived from the Mongols, and they declined over the centuries. The Russians took a lot of land from them. So, yes. And why do Muslims charge a jizya to non-Muslims? Mr. Manor, it is a tax on people that for living in their society and not fighting in their armies. It is a tax for not being a Muslim. It is the price to pay for not being a Muslim in a Muslim land. But do you know anything about the journey of Odysseus after Trojan War? 10 years, written about Homer and his sequel to the Iliad. I'm wrapping up, so I'm going to make it a quick answer. What is the meaning of life? I don't know, Mustang, but hopefully the meaning of you coming here is to like and subscribe. So you don't blame the white man for any of the colonization? No, I don't. I mean, I do. I blame him for tons of it. If you had been listening before, instead of just stirring up the chat, you would have heard me talk about how the Europeans did a lot of damage with that, how it's comparable to me crashing into someone's house with my car. I think that's a leading gotcha question that's not very fair. But the truth of the matter is, I do blame white people for that. Yes, absolutely. I'm saying that the Mughal Empire was in firm decline long before that. And if you know about the Maharashtra Confederacy, you know that the Indians were fighting amongst themselves when the British and French were there. It's not a zero-sum game. It's not all or nothing at all. The Khazars are not Ukrainian. At least I don't think, unless we're talking about we're thinking of different groups. So thank you for liking and subscribing, Mustang. Thank you, Tyreeb. I think you're secretly Muslim since you keep talking good about it. Norman Christians in Sicily also treat Muslims well, but no one talks about this. There was a lot of resistance to Muslims there. And Mr. Manor, I love this. See, this proves my point. People are calling me Muslim, and people are calling me Islamophobic. I can't win, which means I am winning. I'm being a fair and objective historian who tells the truth. That's the job of the historian. Yeah. Oh, yes, Tarib. I know where you're going with this. I've heard of this before. It's not true. What do you think about the Shroud of Turin? It's interesting to me. It's one of those things where I'm agnostic on it. I don't really know what to think because it has been debunked and it hasn't been debunked. I think it's an extremely powerful religious tool for people. This just shows the power of imagery and tactile things in religion, such as relics, and it's probably the ultimate relic. Will Putin bring... Oh, Henry, great to see you. Putin bring Elon and Trump together? I don't think so. Even the Europeans left infrastructure intact. Why don't people of Africa continent? Yep. Did Cossacks write the letter full of swearing and disrespect to Ottoman Sultan? Sounds like something the Cossacks would do, so I'm going to say yes. Very odd how all the comments are about Islam only. There were a bunch of comments earlier about a bunch of other historical topics, like the Odyssey right now, that I just answered. The Sea People are a group of different groups. I think they're Grecian, but they're more than just that. They're from the different islands in the Aegean, and they settle different areas like the Philistinia in ancient Palestine. How long did the Ottoman Empire last, and could they have ruled the world? What stopped them? Was it Kemal Ataturk being a traitor? No, Kemal Ataturk actually saved the Turks a lot of face after they got humiliated and absolutely decimated. Look at a map of the Ottoman Empire in 1920, what the Europeans did to it because of their loss. Look at the Treaty Lausanne and how Kemal Ataturk got the Turks back a lot of the land they had lost including Constantinople. No, the Ottomans were in serious decline throughout the 1800s and barely survived the Crimean War because of the British and the French. Islam is not all flowers and dandelions. Neither is Christianity. I'm just saying you've highlighted Muslims in a good light more than you have Christians in the stream. You don't praise Christianity in the same way. If I'm going to talk about the Islamic Golden Age to finish up, I'll be fair, Mr. Monor. There wouldn't be the modern university system without the Middle Ages. There were no Dark Ages. Obviously, I think the most central point of Western history is the crucifixion of Christ. You can't have the West without Christianity, for good or for bad. So there you go, mister. I've been fair. Why did Voldemort not have Harry Potter killed by his Death Eaters? I don't know. I'm not a Harry Potter expert. Where should the Ukrainian-Russian DMZ be? Oh, I don't know. I just don't know. I think Crimea wants to be part of Russia. I think the line should be pre-war at this point. That the Russians should be punished by that and Putin should be removed from power. And the war should stop. South Indian, a lot of times I met North Indians, both interesting. Thank you for sharing that, Adish. Anyways, the Ottomans took over Constantinople from the Byzantine, which was BS. Yes, that's true. And I talk about that on the channel, so check that out. Thank you very much for joining us. And I'm sorry, I went 10 minutes over where I was going, and I was already going extra because we only had a shorter live stream yesterday. So if you haven't done so, please like and subscribe. Thank you, God Killer. I appreciate that. Yes, Vincentus, it's true, but any golden age of any empire is going to have a second class, to be fair. Yeah, I don't know, Mr. Manoa. I think it's kind of equal. I hope everybody liked and subscribed and enjoyed this. If you want to leave a donation, that would be really helpful. Join, become a member, get early access, and we're going to do private live streams and all that great stuff. I really appreciate seeing so many great people around. And Evan, I know this was a tough chat for you, but I'm glad you're here as well. Yes, also, Yeshua Ishak, you are right. And the live stream tomorrow is at 4 p.m. Eastern. That's my live stream lecture. I won't be engaging with the chat. Maybe we'll have a little time for Q&A. I'll be talking about the decline of the British Empire after what I call the Third World War, which if you want to know the history of that and why I think that, go check out my live streams on the 7 Years' War and my videos on it. I've been going for 90 minutes almost. So it's almost as long as I usually only go for an hour. I went for an hour and 15 because yesterday I only got 45 minutes in. But yes, tomorrow's a live stream lecture, 4 p.m. Eastern. Friday and Saturday of next week, 6 p.m. Eastern, I do my Q&A, Ask Me Anything. So looking forward to that. And I'm from the United States, Hossein. Please like and subscribe and join us for more history tomorrow. I really appreciate This is History Hefner with the Friendly Neighborhood History channel saying take care, cheers, enjoy some tea, have a good evening, stay safe out there, and remember,